everybody. So today I'm going to be showing you how to create a cute little pumpkin creature using polymer clay. So I have in front of me aluminum foil sheets. You could just find this at the grocery store. I like just regular grocery store ones because they're not too hard to manage and kind of form. I also have white polymer clay. You can find this at any Michael's, Hobby Lobby, craft store. I like the Sculpey brand. It works pretty well. And then I also have some miscellaneous sculpting tools, like a ball tool, this kind of tool. And I'm probably later going to use a paintbrush to do some ridges in our pumpkin creature. So what I'm going to start off with first is creating an armature. So armatures are essentially the skeleton and structure of your sculpture, and it really helps so you're not using too much polymer clay, and also it helps so that it bakes a little bit more evenly and you don't use up a ton of clay. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to be lightly, if you can hear me over the crunching, I'm going to be lightly crunching and trying to start making the form of my pumpkin. Now I'm just going to do kind of a general shaped pumpkin. You could also do like, you know, one that has two layers that's kind of like a pear, more like a gourd. I'm going to do kind of more of a general pumpkin shape. I may make it a little bit bigger on the top just for fun. That's what's really fun about doing things like pumpkins for characters, just because they have a lot of kind of whimsicality to them. So I actually earlier when I was making another one of these, I had a physical pumpkin in front of me, which is a great reference. Or of course we always have the internet. So just looking at any realistic pumpkin helps, just you have a reference on what you're trying to make. It especially helps if you have a real pumpkin in front of you because you can turn it, look at all the sides, and really get that, you know, three-dimensional detail you can't really from a photo. Now I'm going to start by building up more layers just because I really want, you know, not to have too small of a sculpture, and also so I don't have to use up a lot more clay. So like on this one side, it's a little bit lower than I want it to be. So I'm just going to wrap it lightly again on that one side and then kind of push it in. And I think I'm going to make this one maybe a little bit taller. So I think kind of like that. A little bit more at the top. And I'm not creating the stem yet. This is just the main shape of the pumpkin, not including the stem. All right, so now I have kind of a tallish, funky looking pumpkin. I can always curve the edges a little bit by rubbing it onto my paper. Now I put a paper down on the table just to protect it because Sculpey can eat away at some layers of varnish or protective coats that are on tables. So it's a good idea to have a placemat underneath, and it makes cleanup a little bit easier. So next what I'm going to do is I'm going to start molding my clay. So a lot of times if you just squeeze it lightly in your hand, go back and forth, basically kneading it, but we don't really have to worry about air bubbles with this type of clay because it's just going to go into a regular oven. So I'm kneading it back and forth. And then next what I'm going to do is I'm going to start flattening the clay. I'm just using my thumbs. You could also use a rolling pin to get it nice and even. I'm slowly pinching it. Just trying to get it like a consistent thickness all around. This just helps with baking. All right, and then once I have a nice finished pancake, not too thin because you don't want your aluminum foil poking through, I'm going to put that on top of my aluminum foil, and I'm going to slowly start pulling it down and turning it. And what I'm doing is I'm also applying light pressure to my sculpture so that, you know, it's kind of thinning the clay and it's also adhering to the aluminum foil a little bit. All right, and then I still have some spaces left down here where I need to put some aluminum foil. So what I'm gonna do is take a little bit more clay and I'm gonna create what's called a coil. Now, a coil is basically like, you know, whenever you've made probably a snake in school out of clay, that's normally what you start with, is a coil. So I'm gonna knead my clay again, like this. And then a lot of times I'll get the coil started first in my hand just by rubbing back and forth like that. Then I'm gonna roll it on my paper. And you don't wanna roll in one place for too long because then it gets really skinny in one place, and we want this to be as even as possible. So I'm kind of moving my fingers along the coil. All right. And then what I'm gonna do next is I'm going to be, you can kind of see right there, I'm gonna be placing this on the empty spots. And I'm kind of pushing it down to kind of spread it so it doesn't get too thick in one place. And I'm gonna go around and around. And if I push it enough, it should cover all the way over here. And then I'm gonna start smoothing it into our first layer of Sculpey. So when I'm smoothing, I'm almost like petting, just kind of gently going on top and kind of smoothing them together. If you go too much, it's gonna start getting into the aluminum foil layer, and we don't want that. And then once I have all that covered, then I'm gonna start the smoothing stage. Now, I'm not too worried about this aluminum foil that's on the bottom because when it's sitting, you're not really gonna see that, so I'm not too worried, but you could always cover the bottom if you really want to. I will sometimes pull the clay to cover maybe like the first outer edge, because sometimes when it's sitting, you can see a little bit of the aluminum foil showing, but I'm not too worried about the very bottom. So next what I'm gonna do is slowly start using my fingers to start smoothing. You can also use a little bit of rubbing alcohol, just a tip. Some people apply it with just their finger to help the blending process a little bit better, or you could also use like a Q-tip, but sometimes those are a little too fuzzy. So now that I'm done smoothing my pumpkin, we can now start to add details. Now I haven't perfectly smoothed the whole entire pumpkin. I've left some little bits and bobbles, dents, just because it adds more character to your pumpkin. And also, you know, pumpkins aren't perfectly round all the time. You do sometimes find them, like very rarely, that some are perfectly smooth, but most of the time they have a little bit, you know, of organic shape to them. So what I'm gonna do next is I'm going to start creating the details on my pumpkin. So I have this ball tool, and what I'm gonna do first is find the top of the pumpkin where I want to place the stem. So that's gonna be about in the middle of my pumpkin. Now my divot doesn't have to be very deep, but I do want it kind of wide, like that. And then from this divot, what I'm gonna do is pull down to kind of round the edge and pull it towards the rest of the pumpkin. So this creates more of a natural look instead of like literally a hole in the pumpkin where the stem is growing from. All right, and then next, I'm gonna start putting in the divots, you know, like the lines of the pumpkin. So what I'm actually gonna use is just kind of the side of this tool. This is like one of those rubber kind of chisel tools. And what I can do is go from the top and lay it like that and go to the bottom. So see how that makes a nice deep cut? But it's not so deep that you can see the aluminum foil. So I'm gonna go down, 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 so, and this makes a lot of big sections, so you could always do your lines closer together and have less sections. That's up to you. I think I'm going to make this a little bit deeper though. Make this part like that. All right, and then next, I want to start making this look a little bit more realistic. So I have kind of the basis. Now what I can start doing is using more clay to build up a little bit more depth on my pumpkin. So what I mean by that is right now, you know, we have the curved edge right here, but a lot of times pumpkins have a little bit of, I don't know, like a curve, a hump up here, and the bottoms of the pumpkin is a little bit more curved. So what I'm gonna do is take a little bit of clay, I've rolled in my fingers, and I'm gonna place it at the top of this curve. And I'm gonna lightly smooth it in. Like that. All right, and this just helps to emphasize the shape of one of those little sections of the pumpkin. So you can also use your finger to smooth the edge of that pumpkin. Because sometimes, you know, when you use a tool, it kind of gives you a little bit too sharper edges. I could also almost like draw with that. And I'm just gonna keep shaping the rest of my pumpkin. So now that I'm finished putting the main details on my pumpkin, what I'm gonna start doing now is making the stem. Now the stem, I didn't attach it to the main shape just because I wanted to kind of decide what, you know, shape and what direction I wanted the stem to go in, and also making it out of mostly tin foil helps to give it a little bit more character, and because it's really nice and crinkly and very similar to wood. Not that wood is crinkly, but you know, that rough texture. So I'm kind of creating like a stick and then kind of curving it at the top, more similar to a cane, like that. And then, you know, you could have a really long stem or you could do a shorter stem. There's lots of different stems on pumpkins, so that is up to you. Or I could even have it curling a little bit. There are stems that do that. And twisty stems. There you go. And then once I'm happy with my overall stem shape, I'm going to put it in the center of my pumpkin. And then I'm going to start covering it with a light layer of clay. So light because I don't want it to get too smooth because this aluminum foil is so nice and bumpy. You want to embrace that a little bit. So I'm going to make a very thin pancake like this, and I'm going to lightly put it onto the stem. And you have to be careful not to hold your pumpkin too much, or else you may accidentally indent it where you don't want it to be. But you know, you can always smooth it out. It's not the end of the world if that happens. And then once I have a good amount of clay on my stem, I still have to color and cover the top a bit more. What I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to use one of my clay tools, this one, to kind of create some indents on the side of the stem for where it meets the pumpkin. All right, and then I'll leave the rest of this for later. What I want to go ahead and do real quick is now we're going to start creating the pumpkin's face. Now I have these glass eyes from Michaels. You could also make your own eyes out of glass cabochons. I've done that before. It's very fun because you get to kind of design what you want your eyes to look like, but it is a bit time consuming. Now with the eyes, I would recommend having like liquid latex also, just so that you can cover it when you're painting to kind of protect it from any paint that actually gets on it. But if, you know, you have a Q-tip with water on it or a wipey, you know, you won't have too much issue. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab 2 eyes. Now your eyes do not have to match. So like I could do, you know, 2 purple eyes, or I could do a purple and a green eye. That's kind of fun. It's fun to me to do like little mismatchy eyes. So they also come as dragon eyes. So if you're doing a very scary pumpkin creature, you could always use that. I'm going to use these. I think they're kind of fun. And what I want to do first is I'm going to be using the ball tool to find where I want the face on here. So I'm going to put it, I think, right here. And I'm kind of moving some of the clay up a little bit to kind of create like an eye socket for the eye to go in. And then I'm going to put another one over here. There you go. And then carefully, I'm going to put the eye inside like that. Boop. All right, now these fit exactly inside the hole, but they don't have very much expression on them. So a great way to create expression on your pumpkin is by taking more clay and kind of creating eyebrows. Now, if this is going to be a very happy pumpkin, then I'm just going to take a little coil, kind of more of a brow bone than a, you know, eyebrow, and I can just kind of create a relaxed little eye. So if I make it go down a lot, oh, a little angry. But if I want it just like a nice relaxed little eye, then it'll just be, you know, kind of just a round piece. And then I'm going to smooth it in to the rest of my pumpkin. Not that it disappears, but just so that you don't see that seam right there. And I will have to indent my pumpkin a little bit again. That's okay. So see how that adds a touch more expression? And then I'm going to do that on the other eye, and then I'm going to use a different tool to go ahead and do the mouth. Now for the mouth, I want this to be a very happy pumpkin. I already have done kind of an angry pumpkin. So I'm going to take a whatever kind of flat, doesn't have to be sharp, a flat tool, and I can indent into the pumpkin and do lots of different expressions. So that just kind of started the face, and then I can curve the smile upwards like that. So it could be a slight smile, or if you kind of open the mouth a little bit just by pushing the clay. So if there's not enough clay right there, sometimes you'll start seeing aluminum foil, but I'm going to go ahead and put some more back in there. right, and we have a very happy pumpkin, and I'm gonna go ahead and start tweaking the details and finishing up this cute little face. All right, and then the last thing I'm gonna do before I put him in the oven is obviously cover the rest of his stem, but also we wanna put a little bit of texture. Now I can score some little lines with this tool on the side of the pumpkin, or even draw little lines like that. And this just kind of roughs them up a little bit. And when we get to the painting stage, this will allow some other colors to kind of be washed in because they'll go into the grooves on the pumpkin. All right, and then that's about it. I'm gonna finish him up and then pop him in the oven. So when you're baking polymer clay, it'll typically tell you on the package what temperature. And this polymer clay, you bake at 275 for about 20 minutes. Alrighty, so our sculpture is done baking. So now we can start the process of painting. So on this one, I've gone ahead and put liquid latex on the eyes, just so you can kind of see what it looks like. So the liquid latex I'm using is liquid peel off latex tape. And this is actually for like when you're painting your nails, but it's really great for protecting the eyes of your creature. But you could also just kind of use a Q-tip to clean it every so often. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you how I apply this. So it comes with a little brush, and basically you just do a thin layer, and it's gonna look kind of messy. You don't want it too thick. And I'm gonna do it on the other eye. And then once it dries, it'll look clear, like that. Not really clear. All right, so I'm gonna be using acrylic paints to paint my creature. So I have an orange. If you don't have orange, you can just make it using yellow with a little bit of red. And then I have a dark brown, like burnt umber. I have a green. I have like a cadmium yellow and white. So, and I also have a water bucket for washing out my paintbrushes. I probably need a paper towel. And then I'm gonna use a bigger brush. You could use like a flat brush, or this is a filbert. And I have a couple detail brushes. So what I'm gonna start with first is just doing an overall coat of orange on my pumpkin. So this one, since the eyes are a little bit drier, what I'm gonna go ahead and do is start on that one. So I'm gonna take orange, and I'm just gonna go up and down. And you shouldn't really need to add any water to your acrylic paint. Now, if I was trying to get into any small crevices, then I would probably use a little bit of water just to cover it. And I'm just holding it from the side, but you could also put it on a plate so you could turn it, because sometimes holding it by the stem is a little unsafe. I could always tilt it to the side like this. And I'm just using long strokes. And I'm not too worried about getting on my stem, just because my stem is going to be a darker color than my pumpkin. Turn it this way. Now with the face, again, I'm not too worried about accidentally getting on the eyes. And I'll kind of show y'all what happens when I take it off. And you don't really have to paint the entire bottom of the pumpkin. I normally do the edges just so that you don't see any hint on the bottom of white. And orange is a fairly transparent color, so after one coat, you may have to do another coat because I still see a little blob of dark right there. And then what I can go ahead and do is start mixing up some different types of orange. Now on my palette, I'm gonna take some orange, and I could make a darker orange by adding a tiny bit of brown. Burnt sienna works a little bit better. Or I could also make a brighter orange by adding yellow, like that. So and what I wanna do is I'm just gonna kind of do smooth strokes just to add some variety, like more yellow on the top of my pumpkin. And then I'm gonna use the browner color for the bottom. All right, now I want to let the orange section dry. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is wash off my paintbrush. And I'm going to go ahead and do a layer on my stem. Now stems can be green, they can be brown, they are kind of, varied. So I'm going to do a base color of green. I'm going to add a little bit of brown to it though, so it's not too bright. So if yours is super wet, you could always wait for this to dry and then paint this layer. All right, and then as I'm getting to little smaller areas, I'm going to switch brushes. If I'm trying to get into those little crevices, I can add a little water, just because this is a base layer. I'm kind of using a little water to edit any green that got on the pumpkin. But, any little areas like that actually make the pumpkin look a little more real, because there's always a little bit of variety in color on pumpkins. All right, and then I'm going to let this layer dry, and then we'll come back and start adding some more details. Now, if you had a blow dryer, I would carefully blow dry your pumpkin. You don't want to get it too close to the latex eyes, just because the latex may heat up and it may be more difficult to take it off. So, all right, so now that my pumpkin is dry, I can start doing some details. So on the edge of the pumpkin, I did score in these lines, and a great way to define those a little bit is to take your brown and a little bit of water. What I can do is just lightly go over those. And then I can actually take a paper towel and wipe it off. And it's only gonna stay in the grooves of the pumpkin. Now, the other way that I can do this is just by taking a little bit of water so that it kind of slightly fades away, especially if I wanted this to look like an older pumpkin. So, but I'm gonna grab a paper towel. Or even a baby wipe works if it's not too wet. Because if it's too wet, it'll take off all your paint. So see, kind of makes those lines show up. Now, the other thing I want to do on my pumpkin is I want to, of course, I would keep working on the lines and fill that in. And then one of the end things I want to do is just to make the mouth a little creepier, a little darker, I'm going to use black, or you could use brown. And I'm going to fill in the mouth. And anything that got outside of the mouth, I'm going to take my baby wipe and I'm going to wipe it off. And then it stays right there. And then the last thing I would do is I would carefully use my finger, or if you have a tool that does this, and I'm going to start just taking off that layer of latex. Now this is a slow process. You can also rub your finger a little bit once you have a little opening. But it's well worth it to preserve your eyes. See, just like that. And of course, I would probably take like an X-Acto knife or maybe a sharp pencil to kind of get those little edges done. And there you go. That's how to start making your own little creature. And of course, I'm going to keep painting on this until I'm done with it.